Imagine this. You are already used to skipping breakfast, eating your first meal at, say, noon, and closing the kitchen around 8 at night. That is the classic 16-8 pattern. Now someone says, forget that, just eat once. Sounds simple, almost efficient, but what actually happens inside your body when you compress everything into one single meal a day? Does your metabolism say thank you, or what are you doing? 16-8 means you fast for roughly 16 hours and eat during an 8-hour window. One meal a day means something entirely different. One short eating window of maybe 1 hour and nearly an entire day in the fasted state. You are not just skipping another meal. You are changing how often your hormones spike, how your cells get fuel, and how long your organs sit in rest and repair mode versus digest and process mode. Here's the catch. More fasting does not automatically mean faster fat loss or a magically faster metabolism. Human studies on time-restricted eating show benefits for insulin sensitivity, blood pressure, and body composition. But they also show that intermittent fasting is not a miracle compared with normal calorie control. When you move from 16-8 to one meal a day, you're turning the dial further in a direction that can help some people and backfire in others. The rest of this script is about understanding exactly where that line is. Your body is basically switching between two main modes all day long, fed mode and fasted mode. In fed mode, insulin rises, your cells pull in glucose, your liver stores some as glycogen, and whatever is extra gets moved towards storage, including fat tissue. In fasted mode, insulin falls, your liver releases glucose, and once that runs low, your body starts leaning more on stored fat to keep you going. That flip between modes is what makes intermittent fasting interesting. With a 16-8 pattern, you spend a good chunk of the day in that low insulin, fat-using mode, but you still have 2 or 3 eating moments spread through the 8-hour window. Studies on time-restricted eating with about 16 hours of fasting show improvements in body mass, fat mass, and markers like insulin resistance and blood pressure, sometimes even when calories do not change much. Your metabolism gets a predictable rhythm: feed, process, rest, repeat. On one meal a day, that rhythm looks vastly different. You are in a deeper fasted state for most of the day, so you rely longer on fat and stored fuels. And then you drop one single large metabolic bomb when you eat. Early data on eating one meal per day suggests that it can lower body weight and increase fat oxidation during exercise, meaning your body becomes more willing to burn fat as fuel. But the price is more extreme swings. Longer fasting stress, one giant hit of digestion, and a very compressed chance to get all your nutrients in. Think of insulin as a traffic cop for energy. When you eat, especially carbohydrates and protein, insulin rises and tells your cells, open the gates, fuel incoming. While that signal is high, your body largely prioritizes burning the stuff you just ate and storing some for later. When insulin is low, that same cop steps aside and your body goes, okay, time to pull from savings, and leans more heavily on stored fat. On a 16-8 schedule, insulin goes up a few times inside that eating window, then has a long pause overnight and into the morning. You get repeated but moderate insulin waves. On one meal a day, you may get a single big spike when you finally eat, but you also get a much longer stretch of low insulin time. Extended fasting research shows that as fasting hours accumulate, carbohydrate use goes down and fat oxidation keeps climbing higher, meaning your body becomes more and more dependent on fat as the main fuel. That shift in fuel use is often called metabolic flexibility, your ability to switch between burning carbs and fat depending on what is available. In a trial where people ate one meal in the evening, they not only lost weight, but also showed higher fat burning during exercise, a sign that their bodies had adapted to that long daily fast. So, when you move from 16-8 to one meal a day, you are likely pushing your body toward greater dependence on fat as fuel. The open question is whether that shift feels like super efficient or constantly drained. and that depends a lot on your context. One of the biggest fears people have is the so-called starvation mode. The idea that if you fast too much, your metabolism crashes and you stop burning calories. On the other hand, some people swear they feel like a furnace on one meal a day, warm, focused, and dropping kilos. So which is it? Is your resting metabolic rate going up or down when you compress your eating into one meal? When researchers look at intermittent fasting in general, including time-restricted eating and alternate day patterns, they usually find that weight loss and metabolic health are similar to classic daily calorie restriction. In many trials, resting metabolic rate does not tank dramatically over the short and medium term, as long as people are not in a massive, prolonged calorie deficit. A recent large review even suggested that intermittent fasting is not clearly superior for weight loss compared with traditional diets, which is a great reminder that the total amount you eat and your overall habits still matter a lot. Specifically for one meal a day, the data are more limited, but the human study where people ate a single evening meal found reduced body weight and increased fat oxidation without evidence of destroyed physical performance, which indirectly suggests that their basic energy-producing machinery was still working fine. The tricky part is long-term adaptation. If one meal a day makes you undereat chronically, your body will eventually defend itself with some metabolic slowing, just like with any strict diet. So the real question is less, does one meal a day magically speed my metabolism, and more, can I do this pattern without pushing my body into chronic stress and underfueling? Now let us talk about something almost everyone fears: losing muscle. When you hear 23 hours without food, it's natural to imagine your body chewing through your biceps to survive. Muscle is metabolically active tissue, and your body does not like to waste it without a good reason. But if your calories are too low, or your protein is very low, or you stop moving heavy things, muscle becomes more vulnerable, no matter which diet you follow. With a 16-8 pattern, it's relatively easy to fit in 2 or 3 solid protein feedings and still lift weights. Several time-restricted eating studies show that people can lose fat while largely preserving lean mass, especially when they keep protein intake adequate and maintain resistance training. In other words, the 16-hour fast by itself does not automatically strip muscle, as long as the basics, protein, total calories, strength training, are in place. On one meal a day, things get a lot tighter. You have exactly one chance to hit your protein target, one chance to deliver amino acids for muscle repair, and fewer separate signals to stimulate muscle protein synthesis across the day. Early data on one meal a day focus more on fat oxidation and body weight than on detailed muscle outcomes. But from what we know about muscle biology, trying to gain a lot of muscle on a single meal is an uphill battle. For someone with excess body fat who just wants a simpler structure for a while, one meal a day can still work. But for athletes or people chasing maximal muscle, the trade-offs are very real. If you have ever tried one meal a day and felt a mix of "this is powerful" and "this is brutal," you can blame a lot of that on your hunger hormones. Ghrelin, sometimes called the hunger hormone, rises before your usual mealtimes and makes food look extra attractive. With a 16-8 pattern, ghrelin pulses are still fairly regular because you eat several times inside that eating window. Your brain gets repeated feedback that food is coming, so the hunger waves tend to be smaller and easier to surf. On one meal a day, those waves get stretched and reshaped. At first, you may feel intense hunger around your old breakfast and lunchtimes because your internal clock still expects food. Over some days or weeks, ghrelin pulses can adapt to your new eating schedule, clustering more around that single meal. In studies on time-restricted eating and fasting, people often report that hunger is strongest in the beginning, then becomes more manageable as the body adjusts to the new rhythm of feeding and fasting. Leptin, the hormone that signals long-term energy status from your fat tissue, also plays a background role. When body fat and calorie intake drop over time, leptin can fall, which may increase appetite and make strict patterns harder to maintain.
One meal a day is not automatically better or worse for these hormones, it just compresses the feeding signal into a shorter burst. For some people, that one big satisfying meal feels psychologically easier. For others, the long daily gap turns every hunger wave into a mental battle. One reason people love intermittent fasting is the feeling of mental clarity they sometimes get in the fasted state. With lower insulin and stable blood sugar, the brain starts using more ketone bodies as fuel, and many people describe a steady, calm focus instead of the post-meal drowsiness they're used to. On a 16-8 pattern, you can catch some of that clarity in the morning fasting hours while still having 2 or 3 meals to keep energy stable later in the day. On one meal a day, you push that effect further. You spend a longer stretch with low insulin and, depending on your overall diet, possibly higher ketone levels. Some people report very stable energy and sharper thinking through the day, as long as they stay hydrated and keep electrolytes in check. The flip side shows up when you finally eat. One very large meal, especially if rich in refined carbohydrates, can create a more pronounced spike and drop in blood sugar, which might leave you sleepy or foggy afterwards. Short-term studies of eating one meal per day have found changes in blood sugar patterns across the day, including higher fasting fat oxidation and some variation in glucose control compared with spreading calories over several meals. The exact response depends on your insulin sensitivity, your food choices, and your activity level. For someone with a reasonably healthy metabolism, one meal a day might feel surprisingly smooth. For someone with more fragile blood sugar control, the long fast plus huge meal combo can be a bit of a roller coaster.
Now comes a crucial part that often gets skipped in social media hype. One meal a day is not for everyone, and for some people, it can be a real problem, even if they handled 16-8 without major issues. Anyone with a history of eating disorders, disordered eating patterns, or a very complicated relationship with food should be extremely cautious. Compressing all your intake into one event can easily turn into binge and restrict cycles, guilt around eating, and obsessive thinking about that single meal. People with diabetes using insulin or certain blood sugar lowering medications also need to be careful and work closely with their health professional. Long fasting windows dramatically change when glucose enters the bloodstream, which can increase the risk of hypoglycemia if medication is not adjusted. Pregnant and breastfeeding women, growing teenagers, and individuals with very low body weight or chronic illnesses generally should not jump into one meal a day without medical supervision because their energy and nutrient demands are higher and more delicate. Athletes and people doing frequent high-intensity training are another group that may struggle with one meal a day, even if they liked 16-8. Fitting sufficient calories, carbohydrates, and protein for recovery into one sitting can be physically uncomfortable and practically difficult. For them, a slightly longer eating window or more meals is often a safer way to support performance and long-term hormonal health. The pattern is only healthy if it matches your life, your body, and your goals. If you are already comfortable with 16-8 and still curious about one meal a day, the safest move is not to flip a switch overnight, but to slide into it. One way is to slowly shrink your eating window over several days or weeks. Go from 8 hours to maybe 6, then 4, and only then try a true single meal day. This progressive approach gives your hunger hormones, digestion, and daily routine time to adjust instead of shocking your system. Next, think about nutrition density. With only one meal, every bite matters. Prioritize a solid amount of high-quality protein, plenty of vegetables, a source of healthy fats, and enough whole food carbohydrates to match your activity level. Many people find it easier to place the meal in the late afternoon or early evening, so it does not interfere with sleep and still allows some social flexibility. Paying attention to fiber, sodium, potassium, and magnesium can also help reduce headaches, fatigue, and that washed-out feeling some people get on longer fasts.
Finally, keep an eye on feedback signals instead of forcing the plan at any cost. If you notice persistent fatigue, insomnia, falling workout performance, mood swings, menstrual changes, or obsessive food thoughts, those are signs that one meal a day may be too aggressive for your current context. There is nothing weak about returning to a 16-8 pattern or even a more traditional meal structure. The goal is not to win a fasting contest, but to find a rhythm you can live with while still protecting your metabolic health. So, after all this, is one meal a day the ultimate metabolic hack compared with 16-8? The honest, science-based answer is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Research on intermittent fasting shows that different patterns, from daily time-restricted eating to alternate day fasting, tend to produce similar weight loss and metabolic benefits when calories and food quality are matched. One meal a day mainly pushes you further along that same spectrum, more fasting, more fat use, but also more stress and more room for things to go wrong if the plan is poorly executed. For some people, especially those with a lot of excess body fat who enjoy structure and do not mind long periods without food, one meal a day can be a temporary tool to simplify life, reduce snacking, and improve awareness of true hunger. They might see improvements in body weight, insulin sensitivity, and fat oxidation without catastrophic muscle loss, as long as protein, resistance training, and overall calories are not neglected. For others, the same pattern could mean under-recovery, hormonal disruption, stronger cravings, and a relationship with food that becomes more mechanical than mindful. In the end, the better question is not which is superior, 16-8 or one meal a day, but which pattern lets you protect your metabolism while living a life you actually enjoy. 16-8 already gives you meaningful fasting time with more flexibility, more chances to nourish your body, and usually less social friction. One meal a day is more like a powerful tool in a very specific toolbox, useful for some, unnecessary or risky for others. If you're thinking of testing it, do it with awareness, good nutrition, and ideally professional guidance, not just because a trend said so. If this breakdown helped you understand what really happens to your metabolism when you jump from 16-8 to one meal a day, remember to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who is thinking about going more extreme with fasting. It might save them from choosing a strategy that doesn't fit their body.